A billionaire was getting beaten in a dark alley, and the only person who stepped in? A 15-year-old immigrant kid with nothing to lose. But what that kid said in the next 30 seconds, it didn't just save his life. It changed everything. Okay, listen. Before we get into this story, I need you to do something for me real quick. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you're watching from. Your country, your city. I want to see how far this reaches. Because what I'm about to tell you, this is one of those stories that reminds you that humanity still exists, you know? All right, so let me set the scene for you. There's this man. His name is Richard Crawford. Now, Richard is what you'd call extremely successful. We're talking CEO of a tech company, multiple properties, the kind of guy who has a driver, a personal assistant, security, the whole 9 yards. But here's the thing about Richard. He got comfortable. Too comfortable. You know how some people get so used to being protected that they forget what the real world looks like? That was Richard. He lived in this bubble where everything was controlled, everything was safe, everything was predictable. Until one night, that bubble burst. So it's late. We're talking like 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Richard had been at a business dinner in the city, one of those fancy places where they serve you food on tiny plates and charge you $300 for it. You know what I mean? Anyway, dinner runs long. His driver had the night off because Richard told him, "I'll just catch an Uber, it's fine." Big mistake. Richard leaves the restaurant, and he's walking to the main street to get picked up. But here's where it gets interesting. He takes a shortcut through an alley. Now, I don't know about you, but if you're a billionaire walking around at night, maybe don't take the dark alley shortcut, right? But Richard's thinking he's invincible. He's thinking nothing bad happens to people like him. He's about halfway through the alley when he hears footsteps behind him. Heavy, fast, and before he can even turn around, someone grabs him from behind. 3 guys, all wearing hoodies, all bigger than him, and they're not asking politely. One of them shoves him against the wall hard. Richard's phone goes flying. His watch gets ripped off his wrist. His wallet's gone in seconds. But then it gets worse. One of them says, "You look rich. Where's the rest?" And Richard, trying to stay calm, says, "That's all I have. Just take it and go." But they don't believe him. One of the guys pulls out a knife. And Richard realizes, oh no, this isn't just a robbery anymore. This is dangerous. Okay, pause right here with me for a second. Be honest. If you were walking by and you heard something happening in an alley, would you step in? Or would you keep walking and call 911? Drop an A if you'd intervene, drop a B if you'd call for help, but not get involved. Because what happens next, most people would have done nothing. All right, so Richard's against the wall, knife in his face, heart pounding, and he's thinking this might actually be it. This might be how his story ends, in some random alley over a watch and a wallet. The guy with the knife moves closer, and Richard closes his eyes. But then, a voice cuts through the darkness. "Hey, leave him alone." Now, Richard opens his eyes, and so do the muggers. And they all turn to see a kid. A teenager, 15 years old, maybe 90 pounds soaking wet, wearing a delivery uniform with a bike next to him. One of the muggers laughs. Actually laughs. And he says, "Kid, get out of here before you get hurt." But the kid doesn't move. He just stands there, staring them down. And here's the thing. Richard can see it in his eyes. The kid is terrified. You can see his hands shaking. But he's not leaving. The mugger takes a step toward the kid. I said get lost. And you know what the kid does? He picks up a metal pipe that's lying on the ground. His hands are shaking so bad, he almost drops it. But he holds it up and says, "I'm not going anywhere." Now, I need you to understand something. This kid has no reason to be here. He doesn't know Richard. He's not getting paid. He's literally risking his life for a stranger. And the muggers? They look at each other. And maybe it's because they don't want witnesses, or maybe they realize this kid's crazy enough to actually fight back. But they take off. They run. Just like that. Richard collapses against the wall, breathing heavy, trying to process what just happened. The kid drops the pipe, and his hands are still shaking. He walks over to Richard and says, "You okay, sir?" Richard looks up at him, at this scrawny 15-year-old who just saved his life. And he just nods because he doesn't even have words yet. The kid helps him up, hands him his phone that's cracked on the ground. And Richard finally manages to say, "Thank you. I thank you. What's your name?" The kid says, Carlos. Carlos, you just saved my life. You know that, right? Carlos shrugs. I couldn't just walk away. Now here's where the story goes from crazy to absolutely life-changing. Richard's still catching his breath, and he looks at Carlos and says, Why? Why would you risk your life like that? You don't even know me. And Carlos looks at him, and there's something in his eyes, something old, like this kid's seen things. And he says, Because nobody stepped in for my dad. Richard freezes. What do you mean? Carlos takes a breath, and then he tells him, 3 years ago, my dad and I came here from Honduras. We were trying to start over, get away from the violence, find a better life. My dad got a job working construction, worked every single day, sent money back to my mom and my little sister so they could come join us. Richard's listening, really listening now. Carlos continues. One night, my dad was walking home from work, late shift, and he got jumped, just like you. 3 guys, took everything he had. Richard's heart sinks. Carlos, I'm so... Wait, Carlos says. There were people around. I know because the police told me. At least 4 people walked by, and nobody stopped. Nobody helped. Nobody even called 911 until it was too late. Richard feels like he's been punched in the gut. Your father? He died in that alley, Carlos says quietly. And I promised myself that night, if I ever saw someone in trouble, I wouldn't be like those people. I wouldn't just walk away. Okay, I need to pause here for a second because this is hitting me hard just telling you this. If you're still watching, if this story is touching you the way it's touching me, hit that subscribe button right now. Because we share stories like this every single week. Stories about humanity, about people doing the right thing when it costs them everything, about moments that restore your faith. Hit subscribe, because what happens next in this story, you're not going to believe it. Ready? Let's continue. Richard is standing there, and he's got tears in his eyes. This 15-year-old kid just told him the most heartbreaking story he's ever heard. And this kid saved his life because of that story. Richard wipes his eyes and says, Carlos, how old are you? 15. And you're working? At 15. Delivery driver. After school. Weekends too. My mom needs help with rent. Richard's mind is racing. He pulls out his phone, cracked, but still working. And he says, Carlos, I need your information. Your full name, your phone number, where you live. Carlos looks nervous. What? Because Richard says, you saved my life tonight, and I'm going to make sure you and your family never struggle again. Carlos shakes his head. Sir, I didn't do it for money. I did it because it was right. And that right there, that's what breaks Richard, because he realizes something in that moment. He's been living in a world where everyone wants something from him, where every interaction is transactional, where people smile at him because of his bank account, not because of who he is. And here's this kid, this 15-year-old immigrant kid who has nothing, who just risked his life, and he doesn't want anything in return. Richard says, I know you didn't do it for money, Carlos, but let me do this, please. So here's what Richard did. The next day, he tracked down Carlos's apartment, knocked on the door, met his mother, and you know what he did? He paid off their rent for the entire year, just like that. But he didn't stop there. He set up a college fund for Carlos. Full ride. Any school he wants to go to. He hired Carlos's mom at his company. Gave her a real job with real benefits. Healthcare. Everything. And Carlos? Richard told him, you focus on school. You focus on being 15. Your delivery days are over. But here's the thing that really gets me. Richard didn't do all this and then walk away. He stayed in their lives. Became a mentor to Carlos. A father figure, even, because Richard realized that night in the alley that he'd been living wrong. He'd been so focused on making money, on building his empire, that he forgot what actually matters. Connection. Humanity. Being there for people. Carlos taught him that. A 15-year-old kid taught a billionaire what life is really about. So what do you think? Did Carlos deserve everything Richard gave him? Or should more people just do the right thing without expecting a reward? Let me know in the comments. I actually read these, and some of your perspectives blow my mind. And if you made it all the way to the end, you're one of the real ones. Smash that subscribe button if you haven't already, because next time we got a story about a homeless woman who saved a CEO's daughter, and what he discovered about her past left him in tears. Remember, Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. See you in the next one.